you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks, it's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there are these things that makes official. Welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a family that loves you, doesn't judge you as harshly as the rest of the world. We are the oldest broadcasting podcast that gives daily shows. There's a handful of us left going back to 2005-ish, 2008-ish, and we provide just amazing content for our listeners. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1 on the TikTokity and all those crazy places in it. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today's featured author comes to us from bookstolifemarketing.co.uk. With expert publishing to strategic marketing, they help authors reach their audience and maximize their book success. Today we have an amazing young man on the show with us today. We're going to be talking about his book called From Out of the Sand. Stephen Sieting joins us on the show. He's going to be talking about his book that's inspirational poetry that came out in 2024, and we're going to be talking to him about all that good stuff. Much like a short order cook, Stephen confesses his thoughts, views, and personal experiences along with biblical scriptures to convey a picture of his life in snippets in time. Even though Stephen was not held as a child and fell behind others in school, he does not allow himself to make excuses for their problems. Each snippet is meant to prompt the reader to take the moment for self-reflection using the Holy Spirit and Bible to improve and grow in the Lord. He volunteered for the Navy in subservice, where he is assigned to the Electronic Text Division, and he qualified for many watch stations, including the most senior underway watch station for enlisted personnel, chief of staff. After the Navy, Steve was very involved in the manufacturing process and controls. Welcome to the show, Stephen. How are you?
Good, and you?
I am excellent. Give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs, website, social media?
I don't have a website really, other than there's /authors, authorsteveseating.com. But part of that is I was published under City of Books, and I just quit them, and I went to self-published. I just got on Amazon as a self-published book.
All right. Give me 30,000 overview. What's inside this new book?
The book is about, first of all, I was raised by Depression-era parents, and it was just, everything was done out of necessity.
Yeah.
I weighed 11 pounds, 11 ounces, and they were told not to hold me when I was a child.
Because you were too large or something?
My mom almost died having me.
Oh, okay.
And then so they didn't hold me. They didn't even hold me when I fed. So
really?
I stayed on the floor. I didn't cry. I didn't make a motion. I could stay there for hours, and that's where they left me.
Wow.
And so I grew up very inward, very shy. And so when I got in school and I got around other kids that knew their colors and knew how to count and knew all this other, I just shut down because I felt so stupid. And I hid. And I'd always hide my head behind the kid in front of me or whatever, just tried to stay low profile. I went to school for the majority that way, and until towards the end of high school, I started realizing life was passing me by.
Yeah.
I needed to change. There was no excuse. I don't like excuses. I don't like it when people make it, and I really try not to let myself make an excuse. And so I realized I needed to change, and I needed to find some place to get an education. And I could just barely read coming out of high school, so I knew college was not my forte. And so I felt led to go into the Navy. And I prayed about it. And anyhow, I took the test, and the recruiter said, "Oh, you're from a good school. You'll have no problems passing." And so when I went back to him, he goes, "You didn't do as good as I thought you would."
Wow.
But he goes, he signed me up anyhow.
Oh.
It turns out I did not pass the course. So I went into the Navy thinking everything's hunky-dory. I got into boot camp, got my head shaved, and they in process and the company. Then I heard them, they put me off to the side and they said, "He don't belong here." And what do we do here? And so they didn't give me a choice. And I really believe that was the Holy Spirit that was saying, "I'm going to make a way for you. You felt led by me to go in the Navy, and you were right." And so even though that was the hardest year of my life, because I had to study and I was in over my head, and I made it. I made it through school. In fact, the first set of schooling, I just barely made it. They'd come up to me and say, "Steve, you got to get 90% on this test to go on." And somehow, by the grace of God, I made the test. And so towards the end of the school, the very last class, they start putting problems in the equipment, and you got so much time to find the problems. And then you get scored on that time. And to get an A, you got to find it in less than 90% of the time.
Oh, wow.
And I was doing that. But the last teacher during the course, during the test, it said, "Sieting, what are you doing here?" I said, "I'm taking a test." He goes, "No, what are you doing here?" He goes, "You're not supposed to be here." He goes, "Everybody wrote in my records," he says, "he tries hard, but he's not going to make it."
Oh, wow.
And right then, the Holy Spirit let me know that he's the one that got me through. He is the one that made a way for me. And
did you work harder? Because let me give you an example. When I was 20, I grew up poor too. And I'm assuming you grew up poor. I may have jumped to that assumption. And so I wasn't a bright kid. I kind of knew some things, and I could see outside of the box because the way I was raised. But I didn't do well in school. And I was a kid who was going to Harvard or Ivy League school and something. I was a poor kid who was going to get a Pell Grant at best, or like yourself, going to the military. And a lot of people go into the military from backgrounds like yours because it gives them the structure they never had. You growing up in the environment you did, they've actually shown that if there's not touch going on with children between parents or anyone, just getting in touch, they'll develop rickets, they'll develop other issues. It's really an important bonding process in our development. And so were you able to recognize consciously, hey, it looks like I'm kind of behind and I'm not kind of matching up to everybody, so I'm going to work harder. I'm going to study more. I'm going to try and work at this so I can overcome it. It sounds like the path you went down.
After I went through high school, when I was about ready to finish up and I realized life was passing me by, I knew I was in trouble.
Yeah.
But I went through grade school just hiding and just doing enough to get by. And I knew my parents, they loved me. I knew but they didn't seem to have the time to invest in me specifically. Now, one summer, my mom did say, "I'll pay you to read a book," trying to get me to read. And I did read a Reader's Digest condensed version of The Flight of the Phoenix.
Oh, really?
I really enjoyed that book, but it took me forever to get through it. But it helped. Yeah. He let me know she was interested in me.
Yeah. But when I was about 20, when I graduated high school, I said, "Look, man, I know I'm a dumb kid. I know I don't do well with school because of my ADHD. So I've got to teach myself what I need to do." And I subscribed to Harvard Business Review magazine, which you get every quarter. And I started training myself for the job I wanted, to be a CEO with many employees and run hopefully big companies or my own company someday. And so I literally put myself through what you might call as an assigned MBA, where basically I learned the shit I needed to learn And I ended up backing out of my Pell Grant my first quarter going to school because I started my first company and was doing for as well as I thought at the time. I was only 18. But I knew I was a dumb kid. I don't know how to, and that's not a bad thing. I was aware that I was a dumb kid and I needed work. And the only person who's going to fix that work was me. And so I started reading everything I could get my hands on about business success, money, investing, banking, mortgages. I started studying all this stuff. And so I overworked because I knew that I needed that. And sometimes that's the best awareness you can have.
Yeah, that's basically my story. I count myself a miracle because I wasn't held, and yet I was able to function as a normal child. Now, when I got into junior high and high school, I wasn't a superstar in sports, but there was nobody that was going to try harder than me because I wanted to be on the team. Yep. There was nothing I wanted more than that, to be on the team. And I made it most of the time.
Yeah. Look at people that are undervalued or underassessed or underachievers and how they make up the difference in work. Some people do have talent, but most people, they really put in the work, and sometimes you can develop talent, I believe. Some people might disagree with me, but I think you can develop talent because you can get really good at what you do if you work hard enough at it.
If you want to, that's the thing. You got to want it.
Yep. So how did you get into writing? Let's get into your book. And is this book kind of a memoir of some of your life, or?
It's a partial memoir. I go through, and I fell away from the Lord for a while because I went under attack from this lady that felt like she wanted my job. And she tried to put me in jail. She went and I worked for a military contractor, and of course, you got to sign your time to a military contract. She was putting down the wrong numbers on the cards on purpose. And then the finance people would say to me at the end of when they were checking the time cards, she was already gone. And they go, "This is not right." And they had me go back through her desk, find out what she had worked on, and I'd correct her time cards and give them to them, and they'd put in the file. We did not know that she was going into the file, making copies of those corrections, and then she took them to the Military Investigative Service and turned me in for a fraudulent time card.
Oh, wow.
And so she was trying to put me in jail because she hated me. And finally, one day, she started asking me questions about this, that, everything she should know. And she worked there 7-8 years. And I finally got tired of it. I says, and I probably shouldn't have put it this way, but I said, you need to put your head on your shoulders and do your job right. Otherwise, I'm going to have to write you up.
Wow.
And she goes, "You don't intimidate me." And then she stayed out the next couple of days. And then 2 days later, we found out we were being sued for giving her a hard time and intimidation and stuff like that. She already tried to sue the company for neurologic disorder because she claimed the Freon messed her up, but she already had history of that, so that case got thrown out. Type of person, her father died, and she tried to get her mother put away so that she could get the estate.
Yeah, she sounds pretty toxic.
Yeah, she was extremely toxic. Anyhow, I had one, and so her problem, she caused so much problems, they ended up closing our facility and moving everything to California. And it cost a lot of people their jobs.
Yeah.
I had to move on. And then my kids went off the chain. And so after all these troubles, and then I got cleared of the military, I got cleared of the investigation. And you'd think I'd be happy, but I guess I felt more like the guy that Jezebel was chasing him, and he went under a tree and he felt like he was depressed and he just wanted to lay down and die.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I felt like. And then my kids got in trouble, and I went through 10 years of depression basically through this thing. And finally I went to a men's conference and I started getting back to the Lord. And it's hard. Once you get that far away from the Lord, it's hard to get back because you feel dirty. You feel like you're not worthy of his presence. You automatically condemn yourself.
Huh.
But at the men's retreat, other people had books and they had classes, and you tend to, and they talk to you. And then there was preaching and so forth, and praise and worship. And I was sitting there in the audience, and I felt like I should write a book. So after the retreat, I went home and started writing poetry. I'd never written a thing in my life.
Really? So this just popped right up, huh?
It just popped right up.
Wow.
I never wrote a thing in my life. And so I kept at it because I felt called. And then I finally published it because I felt led to do it.
How long did it take you to assemble all the poems? How many are in there, or is it sections, or how does it work?
It's sections. I think it's at least 40 poems, something like that. But anyhow, when my mom had already died, and I told my dad that I'd written a book.
Oh, wow.
And see, he always felt like he was a nobody in the church or whatever. He felt like the rich people controlled everything, and he just felt like he was a nobody. And I picked up on that.
Wow.
I picked up on that I was a nobody, and I wouldn't go after girls in high school that I felt like I wanted to date because I felt like I was a nobody.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. And when I told him I wrote the book, he didn't say congratulations or what's it about or why'd you write a book. He goes, now you're somebody. It's almost like I left him outside the road by himself. I left him stranded by himself. I tried to explain to him. I felt led to write the book. I told him less than 2% of the people in the world ever write a book.
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
And so he didn't buy it. I tried to convince him otherwise anyhow. When he got a copy of the book, then he changed his tune.
That's nice.
And then but he never told me he was proud of it. He never? Never. He told people at his church that down in Florida where he was, but he never told me about it.
Well,
he never apologized to me whenever he did me wrong or whatever. He just was not that way.
I don't know. I'll be interested to hear how you square this in your head. But my father was a lot the same way. He was pretty much emotionally disconnected most of his life. And I think I built a huge company and somewhere in my mid-30s, and finally he came to me, and I'll never forget the moment he told me he was proud of me because it was impossible, like you say, to get it out of him. But there's something we have to deal with, especially with people from that generation, because it was a survival sort of experience going through depression. And there wasn't a lot of enlightenment back then as to how people believed and felt. It was just survival. Yep. And you kind of have to accept that a lot of people are doing the best they can. People always, if I talk about a relationship that didn't work out or something, I always go, hey, it was two people that were at a certain place in their life that didn't match up. They did the best they could. They tried. They didn't have all the tools and skills. And the sad part is a lot of that you mirrored as a child. It sounds like the self-worth, the self-value maybe that your father had towards himself. And it's good that you've raised yourself up above that level and you've achieved. And really, when it comes down to it, the person that is really listening to you and being the most proud of you has to be yourself, because no one else in this world is going to give that to you. And well, on an ideal piece of paper, we should expect that from our parents to love us and care us and show us love. A lot of times they don't, because they weren't shown that either. So they're just undeveloped beings that were doing the best they can.
Yeah, my mother was very supportive, very loving. My dad, his father died when he was 16, and he ended up going into the military early and sending money home to his mother. But his mother didn't care for us. She hardly ever talked to us. She didn't want my dad to marry my mom.
Yeah. This is the generational trauma that gets passed down with poor parenting and poor develop people. And all you can do is save yourself. That's really all it is in that situation. When my dad was, I think, in his 70s, he went and saw a psychiatrist, or late 60s, and he realized he'd been an extreme narcissist most of his life, and he had been emotionally disconnected from us. And he cried and he apologized, and he had this clarity of moment. But patterns are patterns. He just went right back to doing after that. He kind of would break through every now and then, and you'd see a human being, but it was how he survived. He kind of mucked up a lot of stuff in life, so the end wasn't going to be cool. And so, you have to love people sometimes, whether or not you have to determine whether you can't give your value of who you are based upon other people, because you're always going to be up for disappointment, right? I've had business partners and friends that I loved. I would have helped them bury a body. I love them so much as my business partners and friends. I used to joke. But sometimes even them, after 22 years, their assessment of me, their understanding of me and who I am and my value was incredibly marred. And I found that with most relationships that I've been in with women, their assessment of me and what I do and how I do it, completely marred. They love the benefits, but their assessment of who I am. And I've just gone through life going, nobody seems to have any good clue as to who the fuck I am, even my own parents. So the person who I need to value, I think what I'm trying to say is, people, the person you need to value yourself the most is yourself. I know that sounds a little narcissistic, but as long as you don't go too crazy with the narcissism, you can have a good, healthy self-esteem. You can have a good, healthy ego. And you just realize that your body, your brain's always listening. So if you put yourself down, if you say you're worthless, it listens and it gives you the life that goes, he wants to live a life where he's worthless and unvalued. And so I'll help him achieve that, because that seems to be what he wants. He focuses on so much. So it's great that you overcome that. You've learned to develop and you've learned to take on your things. And that's what we really do in life. That's that old statue of the man who's hewing himself from stone, if you remember, where he's got the chisel and the hammer, and he's literally separating himself from the rock. That's what we all have to do as people. We all have to sit down, look in the mirror, assess our faults, assess our weaknesses, and try and improve ourselves. And that's where greatness comes. And a lot of people aren't going to recognize that. I've done a lot of great things in my life. I'm in my best year I've ever had in my life right now. I'm happier than I've probably ever been in years. And I'm just smiling ear to ear every day. But it's because I've done the work. Does anyone notice it? No. Do I care? No. I'm not looking for other people's approval. I'm looking for my own.
When you get up to so high up in life, if you're really advancing, you don't get pats on the back anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Your success is your pat on the back.
If anything, you get jealousy and sabotage. People are like, oh, I need to bring this guy down a rung or two because he's getting ahead of me. It's really cutthroat these days. And I value people. I love people. But I just realize I don't need to seek other people's approval in determining my value. I might seek their approval as being a funny entertainer and being able to bring joy to other people and tell great stories. But my personal value is not determined by that. If you don't laugh at my jokes, that's your problem, not mine. That's what Carlin used to say.
To me, it's scriptural that says, the Bible says, you got to love yourself before you can love anybody else, really.
Good point. These are why the Bible and other tomes have these eternal rules of life, because they work. Now, you have a future thing coming out, I believe, some works of writing. Do I have that right?
I have a book called Shells. Shells. It's a memoir of my life. I go from my youth and I talk about the problem with my father and going through school, problem with my girlfriend's family. I used to live there during the weekend sometimes, and then problems in the Navy. When I went in the Navy, my first roommates were, two of them sold drugs out of the room and one was alcoholic, and I was not used to that at all.
Yeah, you're like, this is a bit odd.
I was in over my head. That's from out of the sand. That was my comfort zone. I played in that sandbox my whole childhood, and that was my comfort zone. And then that's where the Lord led me out of the sand into the Navy, and that's what that title is. But
and the title of your book?
The book title from out of the sand is really, it was my sandbox was my comfort zone, and the Lord wasn't going to leave me. And I'm so thankful that He rescued me from myself. Talk about miracles. The greatest miracle God ever did was move the mountain of me, and He changed me and He heard my cry about not wanting to learn, but He didn't want to leave me just there. He changed me in the process of taking me through the Navy and changed the way I live and the way I see things. And He helped me.
A lot of times it's great to have that structure. That's the great thing why a lot of people enter the military, is because they give you structure. If you've been raised in a chaotic environment, chaotic home, the one thing we kind of like having as human beings is a bit of comfort where there's structure, and at least we know what we're working with, even if we're trying to comply or keep up with others. At least we know where we're at, right?
Right.
And there's kind of some rules that we can lean on and expect. So it's great. I'm glad you're telling your story, because there's probably lots of other people that have been through this. For you, it was your sandbox. For me, it was my bicycle. I would race BMX, and I'd literally come home and get on my bicycle and go to the racetrack, the little dirt track that we had with jumps and all that stuff and berms. And I would ride for miles. I'd pretty much be riding up until the time it got dark or my mom called us home. But even then, we'd come home for dinner and then we'd go back out again, or at least I would. And I lived on that bike. That bike was my refuge through my teenage years until I got a car. But I would go clean across town, like miles. I basically used it like a car. It was crazy. But I lived in that car, and that was my refuge, because being at home was just complete chaos, and that's how you survive. But I think sometimes starting that way, where you're not sucked into the system and the chaos in it, and you can kind of sit and watch things. And these days, I'm a big mouth because I had to learn to be owning my own companies, being a CEO and selling vision to everybody. But back when I was young, I was like you. I was very quiet. I was very introverted. I was watching. But when we were watching, we were learning stuff.
That's exactly right. That was my learning.
Yeah. And so that creates a foundation where you're not just being a bot or an NPC being sucked into life and its thing. I think like most people do, if they have early popularity or success, they just go, okay, this just works. I'm just going to ride it. But for us, you watch, you learn, you plan, you map, you strategize.
I did have a rule for that, though.
Really?
When I made my rule up that when I was watching people, I was not judging them. I was going to judge whether it worked or not, and if it was going to work for me.
Yeah. See, I was doing the same thing. I'm like, I realized life was. We would get the big Sears catalog and J.C. Penney catalog. Remember back in those days?
Oh, yeah.
You flip through that thing, and it was about the size of a phone book. You could kill somebody if you hit him with it. It was so heavy. It was like you almost needed a lift for it. But I was going through the catalog one day, and I realized life is a catalog of different lives and styles that you can live. And you have the right to choose that. If you want to be a fireman, you can go be a fireman. You want to choose something in the catalog to go be a police officer, an astronaut, whatever. You can choose that life. And you can also choose something different. I'm sure you do the same thing. I'll order something from a catalog, and I'm a photographer for 10 years. And then I decide I don't want to do that anymore, and I go do something else. So I go to the catalog and pick out another life. And we go through these cathartic moments throughout life where we change our life up. They go, I'm bored with that, or I don't think that's right for me anymore. I want to do something different. I've grown and changed. And that's the beauty of life. And the sooner you can figure that out, because so many people just go right into life, and it's like that Fight Club scene with Brad Pitt in the bathtub and Ed Norton on the toilet. And they're talking about how life is just being pushed on them. Like, I asked my dad, what do I do? He said, go to school, go to high school. Okay, great. I went to high school, Dad. What do I do next? Go to college. Okay, I went to college. What do I do next, Dad? Get a job. Okay, I got a job. What do I do next? Get a wife and have some kids. Okay. And that's not the prescription for happiness and success, but society sells that BS to us because it populates a species and serves as a great cog in the wheel of breeding and making governments more money. I woke up early and saw that people were having midlife crises. People were miserable in marriage. Sometimes the kids were miserable. Sometimes everyone was miserable. And I'm like, how do I avoid these pitfalls? And how do I make choices where I won't end up as a miserable sack of crap when I'm 40 or 50? And so I made choices and decisions to do that. But if I hadn't had that introversion, that ability like you and I talk about to sit and look and watch and learn, I would have done like a lot of people do. They just go racing right into whatever society's program is. And then by their 40s and 50s, they wake up in a midlife crisis because they realize they've been living someone else's life for the past 20 or 30 years. And so I like the fact that we were introverted when we were young and we watched and learned a little bit before we jumped in the pool.
Yeah, when I graduated high school, I was standing by my parents and everybody was running around screaming and howling and having a good time. I was standing there and my mom goes, "Are you happy?" I go, "No, not really." She goes, "Why?" I said, "Why?" I said, "Look at this. They don't know that they're going to face reality here shortly. They got a responsibility that they got to start living." I said, I didn't want to graduate because I didn't want to face the responsibility.
Yeah.
So it was something that I knew I was going to have to change, but I knew that was part of the deal. Now, moving on was into responsibility was the next phase of my life.
Yeah. Now, why do you like poems? Why do you like writing in that prose? What is it? How does it work for you, and why do you like it so much?
I started off, I didn't write on a keyboard or nothing. I was shared with, you can see right here, I started writing on paper, rewriting it. And these are my first attempts, and I would rewrite it until I was satisfied, and then I would put it on the computer. It was a slow process for me to sit back and relax and think about it and be guided by what the Lord wanted me to put down on paper. I felt like I was answering the call to write the book, and I needed His help to do it. Taking time, writing it out, helped me see it. And it really helped me start to spell better. It started helping me form sentence structure better. So it was a growth process for me.
Yeah. And that's the best way to grow, is to do the work, learn, and that's the only way you're going to get into it. Yeah, writing has made me a better writer. I'm not sure I'm perfect yet, but it's made me a better writer. It's made me a better person. It's totally improved the quality of my life. And so many brilliant people and successful people, they journal, they write, they are self-reflective, I think is the message I'm trying to say. Yeah. It's a great way to get better at what you're doing. So as we go out, give people a final pitch out to pick up your book and your .coms, your website. I believe I have a website for you, author Stephen, your last name.com, Sieting.
Yeah, that's that website, but that'll take you to, I quit that and I started producing my own. I'd rather you go to www.amazon.com.
Okay.
/out-sand-/ and that'll take you right to my book in Amazon.
Okay.
And it's made by Fox Press Media.
Okay, so we want to make sure we have the right version too.
Right. See, the other people, they didn't pay me my royalties.
Oh, wow. We hear that a lot from independent folks.
And it was terrible. And they kept on jerking me around. In fact, I signed with somebody else and then I quit them and they haven't paid me according to the contract. I quit in a short time, so they should refund my money through the contract. They haven't done that. It's tough out there when you're trying to be an author
Yep.
And Fox Press Media has been good to me, but he wanted to first take From Out of the Sand and think about writing a movie about it. And I says, that's not movie material. I said, you want a movie? I said, I'll write another book. I'll write my life story, the complete story. And then he got it, and he thanked me for sending it to him. And he says, this is their group rated it as a 9.8 on a scale of 10 is cinematic content. So in about 8 or 9 months, it should be out on Amazon Prime.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. It's been a great discussion. I'm really excited to see your next book where you tell your journey of your cathartic rise coming from a challenged childhood and how you made it work for yourself. And
I had some rebellious times in the Navy.
Sure.
I talk about that, and I confessed my rebellion, and I confessed the problems I had with my girlfriend's mother. And so it's got a lot of stuff in there.
All right, let's do it. We'll look forward to that. Thank you for coming on the show. Folks, pick up his book wherever fine books are sold. It's entitled From Out of the Sand. Choose to live life as a no matter what disciple of Christ, overcome self, and enjoy living the 23rd Palm life. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.